Eric Hilton Chair. And those chairs, in the name of their benefactor, in this particular case, Eric Hilton, we try to bring to the college and to the student population here somebody from the industry or somebody who is connected to the college and perhaps in the industry 3 times a year to speak to our students, our undergraduate and our graduate students and our faculty from their perspective in the industry. Come on in. There's chairs, I'm sure. Let's see, over here on this side. Why don't you just come on over on this side and before we really get started, no problem. You can stay there. You're fine. Okay. This particular case, we have the Eric Hilton Distinguished Lecture, and I'm going to leave that to one of my colleagues to introduce the Eric Hilton Lecture. But I would like to introduce the Eric Hilton Chair. His name is Dr. Clinton Rapole. Dr. Rapole has been here at this college almost from its inception, first on the faculty, next as an associate dean of the college for many years, and then he served as the dean of the Conrad Hilton College for a period of time. I've known Dr. Rapole for over 10 years, maybe 15 years, first when I was at another university, which I will leave nameless at this point in time, as a colleague, and then over the years since I've been here, he's been one of the driving forces in terms of commitment to increasing the quality and the global reputation of this college that you are enrolled in or you're a part of it as faculty. Dr. Rapole believes that the Eric Hilton Chair lecturer should be somebody who is closely connected and has a root in this college. And so he's chosen to bring each year that we've been doing these lectures somebody who is an alumni of the Conrad Hilton College. And without saying any more about that, I would like to introduce Dr. Rapole, who will introduce our guest.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank all of you that are here for being here. I think it's important that we have a good turnout, and I'm absolutely delighted with the turnout. And naturally, Mr. Cowan's a native Texan, so we should have a large turnout. Before I get into my brief introductions, I'd like to acknowledge the Cowan family. And I'd like you to stand as I call your name, if that's all right. Mr. Cowan, would you? And what I'd like to do is after we get all of these people up, I'd like to give them a big round of applause, but let them all stand. Mr. Cowan, Mrs. Cowan. This is Mark Cowan, and this is Mr. Richard Martini. Now we'll let you introduce your friend. And behind that row of 4 is Mr. Mike Cowan and Mrs. Joy Cowan. Thank you very much for being here. Only if you get them back to Texas do you get a turnout like this. Good morning, and again, thank you for being here for our third annual Eric Hilton Distinguished Lecture Series. I briefly mentioned to Bob this morning that there were 2 people that have preceded him in this Eric Hilton series. One is Alfie Johnson, who was a 1976 graduate, and the second one last year was Felice Jarvis. And he's in good company with those 2. The dean was kind enough to mention my name, and I'm pleased to let you know I have been here for 29 years, and I'm proud of it. I would like to give you a brief background on our endowed chairs before I introduce our Eric Hilton Distinguished Chair Lecturer. In 1982, this college was the recipient of a $21,350,000 grant from the Hilton Foundation over a 10-year period. Many things were provided by this grant. For example, there was a 94,000 square foot addition. This is the north wing that we moved into in March of '74. We had a 94,000 square feet, which is called the south wing, which houses laboratories, classrooms, offices, public space, the library, and archives. As important as brick and mortar are, however, it should also be noted there were 4 endowments provided to our college in that grant, and these four endowments, I'd like to kid the dean on this a little bit. There's the Conrad N. Hilton Endowed Chair, held by Dr. Ron Nykiel, the Baron Hilton Endowed Chair, held by Dean Alan Stutz, and the Eric Hilton chair held by yours truly. There was also an endowment for a development officer. And interestingly enough, at that time, when we received some of this money, we did not get all the money until after 10 years. We were told by Don Hubbs, who was the president of the Hilton Foundation at that time, the first person you hire from this endowment will be a development officer. And of course, that's a euphemistic term for a person who raises money. And obviously, that's a very important function, and the person who is in that position is Mr. Dick Zinser in this college. I feel privileged, honored, and extremely proud to be the first recipient of the Eric Hilton Endowed Chair. What is an endowed chair, and what does an endowed chair do for our college? Well, an endowed chair assists the college in recruiting outstanding faculty to come to our college. It provides the opportunity to develop a standard of excellence that cannot be achieved only through credit hour generation and state funds. It is a way of keeping score with other hotel colleges. An endowed chair provides salary, benefits, travel, secretarial assistance, and teaching assistance. If managed well, the endowment continues to grow. Today, I believe a chair should be endowed at the $3 million level, although $1 or $2 million chairs are not refused. I mention all of this to make you aware of how fortunate our young college is to have 3 endowed chairs. However, it is necessary that we get more endowed chairs to maintain our standard of excellence, to keep score, and to remind you of your responsibility to help your alma mater become the outstanding college of hotel and restaurant management in the world, if not the universe. With that preface, please allow me to introduce our Eric Hilton Distinguished Chair Lecturer, Mr. Robert Cowan, a 1976 graduate of our college and Senior Vice President of Operations of the Starwood Corporation. As you can see, he is the Senior Vice President of the Eastern U.S., and USVI stands for the U.S. Virgin Islands. He told me they have 1 hotel in the Virgin Islands, and he goes there once a week at least. And he's taking his family down there in Thanksgiving. He is responsible for over 100 hotels, actually roughly a range, if you will, of 100 to 114 properties. It's always a pleasure to introduce one of your own. And what do I recall about Mr. Cowan? Many things, but I'm just going to mention the good things. He's a Galveston native, worked very hard at the Flagship Hotel. He earned his degree, folks, in 4 years, matriculated in 1972 and graduated in 1976. A very good year. As well, the 70s were a very good decade. He was also one of the first class of students to move into our North Wing, completed in 1974. March of '74, it was when we moved into this facility. So welcome back. Many things about him are all positive. He's bright, capable, personable. One of the things that I have enjoyed, he stayed in touch during school. He's stayed in touch since graduating quite regularly. He does not realize it, but I was always flattered to have him call and tell me about his career. It has been fascinating, and it has been a privilege for me to follow his career closely. He has been married for 23 years to a person from Texas. Her name is Nancy. He has a daughter, 17, whose name is Kim, who wants to go into the theater. He's trying to convince her that she can't make money there, but she'll have to find that out for herself. He has 2 sons, Luke and Jake, 15 and 13. Our original contact was in 1972. The offices at that time were at Caroline and McKinney, which none of you know where that is probably. It's right down close to the Four Seasons. We had classes all over campus at that time. There was no brick and mortar here, literally. Actually, Caroline McKinney, Dean, would be a real good title for a book on the history of our college. But for this event, I contacted him approximately 1 year ago. In his introduction, I would normally provide a brief history of his career. However, we have asked him to do that. And rather than cause redundancy, I will refrain from providing a brief history of our speaker's career. This will provide him more time. We have asked him to trace his career from its inception and provide to the best of his ability, which is exceedingly great, some of his key decisions in his journey that have assisted him in achieving such a successful career. Additionally, he will provide insight into the corporations he has worked for, including Starwood, and a little about the origin of W Hotels, a most interesting story. Please listen carefully. take notes, particularly those folks in my classes. For I believe this bright, hard-working, capable young man has much to offer in his remarks on his career journey to date in the hospitality industry. Indeed, now listen to this. He emailed me his speech 5 days ago. I have read this speech. I think it's inspiring, and indeed I hope you will be inspired by what he has to say. Robert, thank you for being here. Would you please welcome warmly one of our own, Mr. Robert Cowan.
I tend to have to scream at them to get things done. If you ever have teenagers, you'll realize that. You can be this far from their face, ask their teenager to do something, and they won't hear a word you said. But first off, let me say what a privilege it is to be here today. Dr. Rapal, how long has it been? 25 years? You know, he hasn't changed much at all. He really hasn't. He looks a lot, very, very similar. You know, same type of suit, same glasses. Oh, the little gray hair, you know, and a little sparse up top there. Don't feel bad, I'm getting there too. I put my kid on my shoulder at Disney, and he looks down and he goes, "Dad, what happened to your hair?" So I'll have to ask my mom and dad here who I can thank for that. But, you know, I hesitate showing you the first slide because it's could be in a TV show, the 70s. When I gave the when I gave this picture to somebody to put on this disc, he came back in and goes, "Bob, a brown tux?" It's like, you know, the 70s were a confusing time. But, you know, if you were to ask me 25 years ago if I'd have the job I have today, living in Connecticut where I live, which is really one of the better lifestyles you could ever live. It's outrageously expensive, but it's a wonderful lifestyle. Making really what I make today, I'd say you had been to one too many TGIF parties. Whoop. Can't go back. There we go. They still have TGIF parties here? Okay. Those still exist? About $1.50 all the beer you could drink for about 3 hours? They don't have those anymore, do they? Oh, well. Anyway, when Dr. Rapal asked me to speak today, I was a little nervous and obviously a bit humbled. I'm not used to talking about myself. When I talk to a group like this, it's usually managers and they have to listen to me. But he asked me to talk about my career and what helped make me successful and in Starwood and W Hotels. So I'll hit my career first since the last two will be probably a little bit more exciting. Try not to make this a Pulp Fiction type of plot, you know, where you go from one disjointed scene to the next, but I will go back and forth occasionally. My hotel experience started at the Flagship Hotel in 1971, where I was a desk clerk from 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon, and I shampooed carpets at night. I worked full-time while I was going to Galveston Junior College and had no idea I was going to make the hotel business a career. Need that. Off and on for the next 5 years, I worked in just about every job in the hotel business in that hotel except for daytime housekeeping. When I left the Flagship, I was daytime assistant general manager at the ripe age of 23, and of course I thought I was going to be a GM by the time I was 25. Little did I know it'd be over 10 years later. It's tough to say what I learned at the Flagship except to put in long hours, work 6 to 7 days a week, in a 100% occupied hotel, just working through people to get things done. It seemed like there was no structure, organization. We just scheduled, we worked hard, and ultimately I think what probably I learned the most there was just to solve problems. I dealt with obnoxious people, violent people, nice people, drunk people, and that was just the employees. But actually it's probably the guests the majority of the time. But it was just an old-fashioned hotel with nothing but manual systems. When I look back at it, this is what I remember my role at the Flagship. This is where I met my first mentor in the hotel business, a gentleman named Jack Bouchon. Mr. Bouchon was nothing but a hard-working, straightforward, honest, and direct manager. After a year of working at the Flagship, I decided to enroll in the University of Houston in the Hotel and Restaurant Management School in 1972. Again, when Dr. Rappold said there was absolutely no class, there was nothing here. It was just, I think it was a place where they held the TGIF parties. But I wasn't sure, but he said 1974 was when we first had our classes over here. Of course, that's also when I came across Dr. Rappold, and he probably doesn't remember, but I used to come to him all the time when I needed help. And he always had an answer for me, and I appreciated that. The usual answer was you need to study a little more. But I worked at the Flagship while I was attending University of Houston part-time, and I graduated in '76, and then I worked at the Flagship until through 1977, first full year I graduated from University of Houston. Probably a little burned out at the time, working and going to school. And I was kind of probably a little immature, a little confused. I wasn't sure I wanted to be in the hotel business at that time, so I went to work for my father-in-law. Richard, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. But at the time, this is how I felt after I left the Flagship. You know, dealing with, again, I used to say I just hate dealing with the drunks. You know, you can't reason with a drunk when you're trying to manage them. But so anyway, that's how I felt. After a brief time with my father-in-law, I realized that the hospitality business was in my blood, and I went interviewing again in 1979. At the time, I interviewed with Marriott, Hilton, and Western International, which ultimately became Westin Hotels. When I spoke to Western International, they said, we have a 2-year training program. Now, I'd already had, 5 years in the hotel business, and I didn't want to do a 2-year training program, although Westin I thought was a good company. The Hilton people told me you can expect to work 90 hours a week, and they weren't kidding. And then I went to interview with Marriott, and they told me that they have a 3-month training program, then you got assigned, and they expect you to work 5 days, 50 hours a week, and there was a ton of opportunity to be promoted. I said, of course, where do I sign? So then I had a second interview with Marriott, and you know who the interview was with? Mr. Marriott. I said, you mean there is one? Because back at the time, Marriott wasn't a very big company. Well, it wasn't the Marriott, it was a Marriott. There were several Marriotts in the organization. Also at the time, when I interviewed, they said, what discipline do you want to go into? I said, what's a discipline? They said, rooms, food and beverage, accounting, sales and marketing. And my answer was, where will I move up the quickest? And they said, well, geez, housekeeping. I said, fine, I'll go. And they said, you will? Yeah, sure. So I started off as an assistant housekeeping manager trainee at the Houston Braeswood Marriott, which I don't think is a Marriott anymore. But housekeeping is where I truly learned people management skills. What it educated me on at the time was the majority of the staff had kids as old as I was. And well, I tried to be tough. When you come out of college, you try to be a tough manager and exert your authority because you're a manager. It doesn't work. Until I got in the operation, showed the staff the respect, worked hard, showed them I was willing to do what they were going to do. That's the only time I ever got anything done. And it is truly amazing that once you give people the respect and you give them the tools to do their job, how much you can get accomplished. But it was an exciting time. It was a different time for me. And actually, as a housekeeping manager in Marriott, I had more responsibility than I did as that assistant general manager at the Flagship Hotel. Marriott was a very interesting company. It was a family-run public corporation. Doesn't happen often. Family-run public corporation. Marriott was opening 2 hotels a week at the time. When I started with Marriott, we had about 50. And 2 hotels a week, or excuse me, 2 hotels a month, meant there was just tremendous opportunity. For the next 8 years, I had 6 different jobs, including opening 2 hotels with permanent assignments in Salt Lake and Denver. And then I opened up 4 additional hotels on task forces where you go in for 3 weeks to help a hotel get started. Marriott at the time was on the cutting edge of technology with their sales, reservation system, and basic cost control procedures. This is where I first learned inventory control, pricing, and detailed analyzing of future demand in business. I embraced the knowledge and the technology that was given to us and that was rolled out, and it has helped me manage for many years to come. Marriott was also heavily focused on employee satisfaction. Marriott's credo is you take care of the employee and then the employee will take care of the guest. Their operational and sales structure that evolved was so defined that if you thought out of the box, you struggled because everything was done based on statistics and data without much need for thought. The experience I gained at Marriott for basic cleanliness, customer, and employee satisfaction was and still invaluable. As far as new builds go, Marriott had a formula to develop, build, open, and sell the hotel and keep the management contract. That was key to Marriott, was to keep the management contract. Then they would take that money from that development in those early days and go open up another hotel, and that's how Marriott created distribution. Then once Marriott full service was fairly well distributed, Marriott went into the other tier products like Courtyard, Fairfield, eventually, of course, in the St. Regis and Renaissance. 1983, Marriott also created a customer loyalty program called Marquee Club. Now it's called Marriott Rewards. It was what the airlines did, you know, points per dollar spent. And Marriott was really the first company to do it. And I remember checking a guest in Salt Lake City, and he says, "What is this?" And I go, "It's a points program." And he goes, "Well, what can I get?" I go, "I really don't know." He goes, "Yeah, I know. I got a ton of points, but I don't know what I can do with them." Well, that still exists today because they have blackout dates, and you've heard of that. But blackout dates keep you from using your points during high peak times at various properties. But ultimately, this Marriott Rewards has become their most successful marketing program even to this day. But in the mid-'80s, we were going through an economic downturn. And the Marriott growth, and everybody else's for that matter, had slowed down or almost stopped. Marriott, including me and several others, were all ready to be promoted, and there were no job opportunities because Marriott was downsizing in the corporate office. When you downsize in the corporate office, those people go out to the field. So I ended up being somewhere along the line. Somebody had told me at one point I was promotable to GM, I was supported for it, but I was 42nd in line for a general manager's job, and there was only 12 hotels opening up in 1987. Whoop, don't want to show that one yet. Now the point is you can be the best manager in the world. You can have a 1 rating or an A rating, or whatever company you use. We use this to rate you. But if there's no openings, if there's no opportunities, you're not going to go anywhere until somebody retires. Also about that 50-hour work week I mentioned, it's something that sounds nice, I'll tell you. But if you're committed and enjoy what you're doing, you're going to do whatever it takes to get the job done. In today's world, I don't care if you're a lawyer, I don't care if you're a doctor, if you work on Wall Street, if you're an athlete, if you're successful, you're going to have a commitment to do the job, and there's not going to be a time frame associated with it. When Marriott slowdown occurred, I got a call from a small franchise, privately owned management company called Interstate Hotel Corporation. I was referred to Interstate by another former Marriott person who left, a Marriott VP, and he realized there was no upward mobility, and he referred me for the job, and I appreciated that. They were looking for a regional director of room operations, and I was interested in a multi-unit experience. And so I was very interested. Ironically, Interstate, which is the largest franchisor of Marriott hotels. You know, you have an owner of a hotel, then you have a manager of the hotel, and that manager doesn't always have to be the brand, Marriott or Hilton or whoever it might be. There's franchises, and they pay to put the name on the building, but it's managed by somebody else. Well, Interstate was the largest franchisor of Marriott's. I must say at the time of leaving Marriott, it was a very difficult decision. The most difficult decision of my life at the time. There was a core of us that used to joke, if we cut, we said we were going to bleed a little bitty M's because we were really dedicated to the company. So I turned my first job down with Interstate, and thank goodness for my, actually it's my third mentor in the business, Ted Darnell. He flew from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania down to Dallas where I was working at the time, and he educated me on really why I needed to leave. And basically it was there was no opportunity with Marriott, and Interstate was a small company but a growing company. Before I left Marriott, I had a senior vice president call me and warn me that Interstate was a purely profit-driven company. I looked at him, I laughed, because you tell me Marriott isn't? And he goes, no, it's different. And I'll tell you, he is right. He is right. Matter of fact, here's how he depicted it. Wasn't quite that true. Wasn't quite that true. But Marriott did push the envelope with regard to profit and customer satisfaction. We coined a phrase in Interstate where we asked the impossible. We'd go to teams, we'd go to operation, we'd just ask them to do things that couldn't be done. Well, you know what? We ended up giving the impossible over 50% of the time. You know what? Because we tried. We had a can-do attitude. You know, it's just real easy. It's the first thing that comes out of your mouth, isn't it? No, I can't do that. Well, you know what? You never know. And it's hokey, but you never know what you can do until you try. But we gave the impossible over 50% of the time. When I joined Interstate, we had 18 hotels in 1987. Over the years, Interstate was a very opportunistic company. One year, Interstate was a real estate developer, then a manager the next, then an owner of bankrupt properties the next, from the Resolution Trust Corporation. I don't know if any of you guys remember that. The owner of Interstate was a brilliant business person who took advantage of opportunities that existed in the late 80s and the mid-90s. Interstate grew from 18 hotels in 1987 to over 200 by 1997. By gaining the confidence of reluctant owners such as Cigna, MassMutual, Prudential, any of those major institutions, they were reluctant owners because they had loaned developers the money to do the deal, and then they couldn't make their debt service or mortgage payment. So then the institutions foreclosed on the developers, squeezed them out, and then they had hotels and they didn't know who to manage them. They called on Interstate. IHC's development of a tremendous cost-conscious control environment that did not risk brand integrity from the Marriotts and the Hiltons helped fuel the growth through management contracts and then later through joint venture capital investments. Ultimately, these institutional owners were looking for an alternative to the large brand management because they weren't operating as efficient as they should have. And oftentimes, Interstate, we managed the hotels better than the brands, more efficient than the brands, and achieved the same guest satisfaction. During that time, I was a regional director of rooms, and then I became vice president of room operations and general manager of 3 different hotels, and then ultimately promoted to a regional vice president with Interstate in 1995. Again, key thing was I was lucky enough to pick a company that was growing. Little did I know we were going to grow that much, but I was lucky enough to pick a company so there was tremendous opportunity. Over the years, I embraced the statistical analyzation and flourished by achieving financial results while still using the fundamental people management skills to achieve high guest and employee satisfaction. I was able to take the data and translate it into a challenge to the leadership teams of the hotels, and then that challenge was communicated, and then actions were implemented, and the actions affected change. So the only way change occurs is through communication and action. Shortly after I became an RVP with IHC, IHC did an IPO. Does this sound pretty wild? Let me tell you, it was a wild time, and I'm going to tell you, let the races begin. Once IHC became a public company, the operating environment became even more focused on making a quarterly earnings report. The culture that existed for Interstate for 30 years had changed in a matter of 9 months. At first, some of the staff resisted the harder push for earnings, but the fact is any public company, I don't care what public company you're with, whether it be IBM, Intel, GE, Starwood, Marriott, Hilton, all go through the same processes on quarterly earnings. Starting in 1995, there was a substantial movement to buy and consolidate hotel ownership and management companies. For Interstate, this culminated in being bought by the second largest real estate investment trust corporation in the country, Patriot American, which also owned Wyndham. During the merger takeover, really, it was incredible turmoil in Interstate. We were told that it was going to be a merger, that the management company of Interstate was going to be the management company of Patriot. That just wasn't true. Interstate was bought for its assets, for the hotels that it owned, and then those Marriotts that it owned were going to be converted to Wyndhams. To many of us in Interstate, we saw the path that the merger was going, and we decided to leave. Obviously, the second toughest decision I've had to make in my life, and it is without a doubt the best decision I've ever made. And now that Interstate is selling for $1.75 a share, and when I left, it was $37. And that's when I joined Starwood, the largest real estate investment trust in the United States. Now a little history on Starwood. Going back a few years, between July of '93 and early '95, Starwood acquired approximately 20 hotels. At the time the hotels were acquired, they relied on third-party managers. Very quickly, there was a realization that there was an inherent conflict between the owner and the manager. The owner wanted to maximize the value of the asset, and the manager wanted to maximize the value of the management company. It was Starwood's goal to find a way to own and manage the hotels to maximize the value of the asset and, of course, achieve better returns. In March of '95, Starwood Capital Group completed the takeover of Hotel Investors Trust, or the symbol on New York Stock Exchange was HOT. It was a struggling real estate investment trust. Starwood decided to pursue and take over HOT because the company had a unique structure that allowed ownership and management of a hotel. This is what Starwood believed would give them the competitive advantage over public and private companies in the future. HOT was actually a REIT that was paired with a C corporation. This meant that the shareholder of the REIT was also the shareholder of a C corp. It's called a paired share. Because the REIT does not pay taxes, it was the best public structure to own real estate. However, IRS regulations required REITs to be passive owners of real estate. Therefore, they had to lease the operation of the hotel to a third party. Because HOT was a REIT and was paired with a C corp, which was technically a legal entity, the hotels would be owned by HOT's REIT and managed by HOT's operating company. This enabled HOT to have a tax-efficient structure that did not have a conflict between the owner and the manager. Dr. Opolka, we have a quiz on this later? Although REITs have been grandfathered out. It's the classic REIT that Starwood was is not anymore. We've converted to a C corp. HOT at the time was an over-leveraged company with no management and approximately 25 poor-quality hotels that were in disrepair, and no other company was interested in HOT because the assets were so poor. But Starwood was interested in the operating structure because the value of the paired share was far greater than the hotels. Once the REIT structure was set, the sole focus was to acquire 4- and 5-star hotels in strong markets with high barriers to entry at prices less than their replacement cost. Then we could reposition the properties with a flag change, renovation, or simply better management. While our focus was on making opportunistic acquisition, being an owner and an operator trained us to think like an investor. That is, to do what was ultimately best for the asset in the long term. In late '95 and through '96, Starwood aggressively acquired hotel assets and portfolios across the United States. Smart acquisitions and high barriers to entry afforded a long-lasting competitive advantage when the cycle inevitably changed and you couldn't buy hotels any longer for less than construction cost. We also believe it would be difficult for competitors to replicate these properties in the major urban locations like New York, Boston, Chicago, and it would be hard for them to replicate those hotels. By the middle of '97, in just a little over 2 years, Starwood had grown from 25 hotels with approximately 3,000 employees to 125 hotels with more than 15,000 employees. The Starwood would never be a fully integrated company till it owned a recognized brand. At that time, there was studying done on the REIT, and Starwood realized that it could not only own and manage hotels, but it could buy a brand under the REIT structure, and that's when Starwood decided to buy Westin. The merger of the two companies in 1998 enabled Starwood to maximize the value of the Westin brand through improvements to its owned assets. Maximizing the value of the hotels that we owned through strong management and a brand we controlled was now the cornerstone of the company. And besides, we didn't have to pay franchise fees to Westin any longer. Then why did Starwood acquire Sheraton? Particularly when it already had Westin, which is a very recognized brand. For one reason, it was a once-in-a-lifetime deal. If you looked at some of the Starwood deal makers, I mean, they've been called deal junkies. They just wanted to buy everything. And because Hilton had put Sheraton in play, Starwood had the opportunity to come in and be the white knight and be the preferred takeover company of Sheraton. At the time, Starwood stock was trading at an all-time high, and with using Starwood stock to buy Sheraton, and with Starwood being at an all-time high, it afforded Starwood to buy Sheraton on less expensive currency because the stock was trading so high. Starwood was able to purchase ITT Sheraton, which owned Sheraton, Caesars, St. Regis, a luxury collection and 4 points, again, with relatively less expensive currency. Another major reason to acquire Sheraton was we wanted immediate international distribution and representation. To be a global company, there must be worldwide distribution to compete on a long-term basis. We didn't want our internal growth to occur one hotel at a time, which could take years. Sheraton was the obvious choice because it was the most internationally represented hotel company in the world with tremendous assets, particularly in Latin America and Europe. The combination of Sheraton and Westin made Starwood a dominant global hotel company overnight. Kind of a cluttered slide, but that's all of what we have now. Starwood was able to seize the opportunity. It had a plan, seize the opportunity. The result was a fully integrated international company. And now we have over 75, 750, we might have over 800 hotels in 80 countries with 120,000 employees. This is where I joined the picture with Starwood. Many people have talked about the difficulty that Starwood experienced during the integration of 3 companies. Anytime you have mergers, there's a lot of angst that goes on, and it is a very difficult time. Including Westin, Sheraton, Starwood, and Caesars, the gaming company, we had 4 distinct cultures and 4 different headquarters, essentially in 4 different cities. There were many characters and a lot of different personalities that needed to get together. I kind of equate it to a first-grade birthday party. Everybody leaves with a present, right? Well, in this case, everybody left with a job. We still had all the they're called heritage companies. We still had them all working together, and there was no way consolidation or synergies were going to take place until we dealt with everybody that ended up with a job, because that's what you do in mergers. You merge and you consolidate. Even though all decisions were made with the long term in mind, often the wrong result happened. That's really what it felt like. Once the results didn't occur, more changes and more consolidations were made. As the culture changed and people left, it became a very unsettling time. Actually, in times like these, the safest jobs are on the property, the general manager and those types of positions. The corporate, we're the ones that we were all scared. But as the field sees these happening in corporate offices, they often wonder if they're next when they're really not. But the cultures that existed were Westin was a sedate and refined culture. Sheraton was somewhat disoriented and confused after being involved in a hostile takeover for more than a year. Caesars was an autonomously run entity whose earnings were literally tied to chance. And heaven help us, it's a baccarat winner won on the last day of the quarter. Again, we tried to merge the companies together in '98, and in many cases we had 2 and 3 people competing for one job. The merger of 3 companies, there's going to be redundancies, turnovers, reassignments within the management ranks, and all that had to be worked out. Clearly, one of the most important attributes of today is adapting to change. What Starwood had become was a hard-driving, results-oriented public company. Not unlike any of the Dow 30 companies, not like any of the other public companies, it's really the same. The culture is now an environment where we constantly challenge ourselves for improved performance in all aspects of our business, from earnings per share to profit to guest satisfaction to employee satisfaction. We have statistical information that helps every leader determine where they are in their areas of responsibility. Every leader wants to know where they stand. And with the statistics and with the knowledge out there, you should be able to know where you stand at every time. This communicated knowledge to every employee, every manager, and every leader created awareness without it being a personal opinion or the dreaded politics. Ultimately, what we all need to do and what you need to do as leaders as you go out in the field is you must make your difficult decisions, and then you move forward. Remember, you can analyze information, but until you draw conclusions and take action, nothing will change. Change, again, only occurs through communication and action. In light of the culture changes and challenges, Starwood's long-term strategy has produced, we put over $1 billion, $1 billion in renovating, converting, and repositioning Sheratons and Westins in North America. This is an old room that could be a typical hotel room. This is the new Sheraton brand standard room. We call it the Ralph Lauren room. Looks pretty residential. Very nice, getting great comments on it. This is again an old room. This is the Westin brand standard room that we rolled out last year. We've sold more than $7 billion worth of assets. including Caesars. We sold Caesars for $3 billion. Again, with earnings being tied to chance, you know, we just weren't ready for that. We're too intensive a company. Starwood then rolled out the Starwood Preferred Guest, our frequent traveler program. In its first and second year, it beat perennial Marriott in the coveted Freddie Awards, which are like the Academy Awards of the frequent traveler program. Starwood initiated Weston's Heavenly Bed. If you've never slept in a heavenly bed, when you do, you'll know why. It is an incredible bed. You won't want to get out. It just kind of sucks you in. So it's been such an industry success, it's being copied by virtually every other brand. It's a little bit of details on the heavenly bed. It's being copied even by Marriott. We've created some exciting campaigns with Sheraton and Weston. This is the one that Brian Mayer put it up there for me. My dad's suit has to be pressed real good. He has to stand in front of a lot of people today. It's like, if you're taking care of business, who's taking care of you? And then we have our Weston, one of our most recent ones. And then also culminated into Starwood being, I guess, appointed or rewarded by being recognized as the Standards & Poor 500 Club, 500 company. While some had considered Starwood a startup company, we've moved at incredible speed, and we're only just beginning. Now let's get to the W hotels. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of W. Many people heard of W? Yeah, can you go ahead and show that tape?
Imagine if you could start from scratch and reinvent the hotel business, what would you change? The lobby, the rooms, the meeting facilities, the service? Would you create a place that felt a bit more like home? A place with everything you needed to work smarter and play harder. A place where knowing your stuff meant understanding that the little extras make a big difference. Stop imagining. Start experiencing. W Hotels. W is welcoming, confident, smart, sexy, stylish, surprising, and whimsical. From our one-of-a-kind properties to our one-in-a-million people, we're reinventing the hotel business. W combines the reliability and service of any major business hotel with the personality and style of the world's best boutique hotels. Our designs reflect the flavor of each W city. We'll show you around, then welcome you home. Inside and out, we re-examined the details, amenities, and services that you need most.
If we can't answer your questions off the top of our head,
we'll put your request on the top of our list.
W is redefining what the guest experience is all about. We know you. Whether you're just getting started, well on your way to the top, or you're already king of the hill. Everything we do is designed to keep you a step ahead.
a laser printer at 2 a.m.?
Reservations at the hottest restaurant in town.
A workout to work through what's on your mind.
Whatever, whenever.
We know you demand the best, but we don't just meet that challenge. We go out of our way to wow you with little surprises. Stop imagining. Stay connected. Let yourself dream. Get whatever you want, whenever you need it. Then, do it all again. W Hotels.
Pretty exciting, isn't it? The W brand is a huge victory for Starwood. W Hotels went from a vision in Barry Sternlich's mind, he's our CEO, of what a new hotel brand should be, and into a reality virtually overnight. Hip, urban, sophisticated, W Hotels cater to the new economy business traveler. It's the most successful new brand in the hotel industry, maybe ever. W was originally conceived as an opportunistic idea to, again, maximize the value of the hotels we owned or were building in some of the best markets in the United States: New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Atlanta. And many of these hotels were older buildings in great locations that would never fit the standards of our traditional brands. But they were ideal to being something different. Again, we were employing the number one lesson we learned in the hotel business: maximize the value of the asset. The whole premise around W was to create a product that would sell for more money because it was distinguished by design, and the design would be influenced by lifestyle. Think about it for a second. You can associate these products with a certain lifestyle, and these products might even make you feel good. We could put a number of products up here. It could be, Ferrari, could be Mercedes, could be a lot of different products that actually make you feel good. They identify with the consumers because they fit their lifestyles, and they make the consumers feel good. Starwood had the same premise for hotels and wanted to give the consumer something different that is consistent with their lifestyles, but different from every other hotel product, which ultimately has become a commodity. If you stop and think about it, it's brilliant in its simplicity. Why does every hotel room have to be the same? And we'll go back to a hotel room that could be any hotel room in the country. Same thing, any hotel room. That's our hotel room at the W Court on 39th and Lex. You'll be staying there, Mark, soon. So, see quite a difference. It's an exciting room. Why can't a TV be big enough to see? I know you can't see it, but there is a TV there, and that's what it looks like. I should have brought a picture of an Embassy Suites TV in their armoires, because you're way back in the bed in that suite, and the TV's about that big. It's very difficult to see. And also, why put a TV in an ugly armoire? With the TVs that we have today, they're much more attractive, they're much bigger, and much easier. Why does the check-in experience have to be boring? Typical hotel desk. That's a W check-in. Is that New Orleans? No? I'm not sure where that W is. I haven't been to all of them yet. The results of this thinking and implementation have been fantastic. We have opened 12 W's in the past 18 months and have an additional 8 W hotels under development. These hotels penetrate their markets better than all other brands. We're also competing with luxury hotels and ultimately first-class hotels, but a very, of course, hip and upscale clientele. Of course, our numbers reflect it. There's another lobby. That's New York on 49th and Lexington. It's another lobby. I'm sure everyone thinks that W was created as a pet project of our CEO. That's what Wall Street had accused us for, but W has been an incredible success, and remember, we are a public company, so it wouldn't be a pet project. W hotels run profit margins on the average in excess of 40%. We have a return on capital approaching 15% within the first 18 months of operation, which is unheard of in our industry. When you look back on my career, it looks like a little bit of a wild ride, which I guess it would be. I've had 13 moves in 23 years. I'll tell you that it hasn't always been fun. Gone through some angst through a couple of different companies. The angst almost as I had when I walked up the stairs today. I walked up the stairs feeling like I was taking an exam, and I haven't had that feeling in 23 years. It's like, oh my God, am I prepared? But I'll tell you one thing, it's never been boring. In my entire career, there's always been something going on, and it seems like every day is different, and that's what I've enjoyed about the business. To wrap this up, I thought I'd give you a few things that might help you in your career based on my experience. First thing, pick an area of the hospitality business where there's opportunity. Choose a company that gives you a good foundation of fundamentals in people and profit management, and also has the internal growth to create job opportunities. Choose a mentor or two along the way. And the mentor you choose It may surprise you because it might be the mentor that is the hardest on you. Because you're not going to learn from a mentor that tells you you're doing everything right, because you're not. I can tell you that. You know, choose a mentor that's honest, tough, and fair, and will always challenge you. Don't become scared or defensive when someone corrects you or tells you of a needs improvement area, because we all have them. Remember, being defensive can make you deaf and blind, and you really won't see the big picture. You know, to be successful, when you do get that way, you got to recover. We all have a recovery time. Take a moment to step away from a room, or take a deep cleansing breath, or do something, but you have to recover from those times, because you can recover and you should recover. Everybody makes mistakes. Challenge yourself constantly, even where your area of responsibility is performing well. The minute you relax, something will go wrong or somebody will pass you by. Watch your professional and personal habits. I've never had to fire anybody because of a good habit, so be careful. Embrace technology and the knowledge it can give you. With all of the data available, you should always know where you stand in your job. Self-awareness is a powerful ally and a tremendous confidence booster. Try to curate your own self-awareness. Try not to make somebody tell you where you stand. You should know. Ask the impossible of yourself and your staff sometimes and see what happens. When you ask the unreasonable, for some reason, the unreasonable gets accomplished. Remember, a good plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow. Make decisions and take action. As a leader, that's what your job is to make a decision and you deal with the repercussions. Don't be only a problem identifier, but be a problem solver. That's what will separate you from everybody. And nothing great was ever achieved without taking a little risk. Some of the risks I thought I took were changing companies, was moving around as much as I have, again, 13 moves in 23 years. But I'll tell you, that movement that I had, to me, is invaluable. I was able to leave the bad things that I did, or some of the bad management practices, or the bad luggage I had at one operation. When I got promoted to the new operation, it was just starting anew. And it just has a different feeling, a very exciting feeling. Why do you think coaches change so much in all the different sports? Ultimately, you've chosen this career to be a leader. And you have to be a leader because this is a people business. No matter how much technology we get into it, you have to learn how to manage people. And the new millennium is a different time. When I was coming up, it was transfer me anywhere, anytime, and it meant a promotion, it meant more money. And that's what I was happy with. Today, people don't want to move as much. And I do encourage you to get different experiences and move around, because you'll realize that you do make a difference, but you have to do it through your leadership. That's about all of the presentation I have. I want to thank you again. I'd be glad to answer any questions if somebody might have some. But it's been fun coming back. We have one, I think.
What is the average occupancy rate at the W Hotel? Are people sort of scared to come to them?
No, I don't think people were scared. I wouldn't say scared. I would say they just didn't know. But we opened our first W Hotel in New York City at the time when New York City was running 85% occupancies. So it was very easy to fill hotels. Matter of fact, Manhattan was so busy that the business that was being pushed out was going to the Meadowlands, was going to Parsippany, was going to Stamford, Connecticut. I mean, that's how busy it was. Manhattan's not that way anymore. The first quarter has been I'm sure all of you know, there's a little bitty, I'm not sure you call it a recession, but there's certainly an economic downturn. But no, people weren't scared. The minute you go into a W, you realize this is pretty neat. And I think Mark can attest to that. He went to the W in New Orleans, and same thing, I stayed at the W at the Sheraton New Orleans a couple of nights ago, and then I went over to the W for dinner. You just go from a convention, factory, hotel, and then you walk in the W and go, oh, I was just relaxed instantly. So no, I wouldn't say scared, just awareness, and it didn't take long. We had more free PR, if you want to call it that. The New York Times, the New Yorker, all the publications here in New York, it's amazing. We had so much free PR that we didn't have to do much advertising for W, and people just started coming. Thank you for the question.
Share with this room why REITs no longer exist.
Based on my knowledge, which may be true, may not be true, but based on my knowledge, Patriot American and Starwood were buying everything that walked. Again, the REITs themselves were deal junkies. They were buying everything in real estate that you could buy for cheaper than construction costs. And they were buying it for 30, 40, 50 cents on the dollar. And Patriot and Starwood ended up beating out Marriott, Hilton, and many other companies because they could pay more. Because in REITs, you don't have to pay taxes. It's a tax-free structure. So when Sheraton was bought by Starwood, Bill Marriott and Steve Bolenbach got together, and they got all their lobbyists together, and they essentially grandfathered the paired shared REIT structure out. So you could not add to the REIT anymore. We still have the REIT, I believe, somewhere in our sub-corporation. We're a C-Corp, we've converted, but somewhere in our structure we've got the REIT because it's still a tax-efficient structure. But essentially REITs were grandfathered out. You couldn't add to them. You could have them, but you can't add. So, strange bedfellows, huh?
With the change in Bulgarian, Marriott, Conrad, Rosewood,
we're going to continue. We think we've got a great niche. We don't think you can replicate W's. You go into W, it's tough to replicate it. Plus, we've, you know, again, you know, you can look at a lot of other brands. You can look at Rainforest Cafe. You can look at Hard Rock. You can look at some of these others that did try to get in through design only. But, you know, that got the customer in once. Then those entities ended up going bankrupt because they didn't have good food. We like to think we've got a great operational structure. I mean, you look at my career in the slide of all of where I've been. In my structure, we have a president of North America, we have an executive vice president of North America, and then there's myself, east side, and then Rick Sewell is on the west. Then we have RVPs under us, and there's like 22 altogether. Those 22 and above, from Ted and me, we all have that same background. We all are nothing but just nuts and bolts operating people. We're not development people. You know, we didn't come up through any other industry other than the hotel business. We all started with roots as an hourly. So we think that that operational structure will give us, you know, the tool to get the customer back 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, along with SPG. This SPG, this customer loyalty program, is huge. You can pull Marriott off of a building that has their Marriott Rewards or HGA, and you can put a brand without a loyalty program, and the occupancy just goes in the tank. And I would like to, we're still evolving in that with SPG because it's only been around for a couple of years. But clearly, 20, 30, 40% of our business is SPG related. We make it that way, and we sign people up. So, don't really see it as a threat. Well, you can't get much higher than St. Regis. You really can't. St. Regis has the highest average rate in New York City. It has a $700 average rate. It is without a doubt, could be the finest hotel in the world. It's not a resort, but you can't get much higher than St. Regis. St. Regis down here, we can't replicate that because we don't have the average rate. We have a fine hotel here in the St. Regis. You know, there's a point where you provide so much service and you provide such a capital-intensive building that it's not good for a public structure because you just don't make the returns that you need.
One more question. The tenant structure of but in other cities, say, worldwide, I don't know how W other than Sydney is going to expand worldwide. Are they in any competition with W or W with that structure?
No, we don't think so. Again, you stay at one of those boutique hotels, you stay at this. Part of the strategy with W is to make sure we put good restaurants and bars into the W hotels. And we're a joint venture partner with Randy Gerber, who is the Whiskey Blue, Whiskey Park. His wife is Cindy Crawford. So, you know, so all the model types come to the bars, and then guess what? Everybody else follows. So, oh, and man, it's $300. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. You know, again, you take boutique hotels. The first W we built was almost 1,000 rooms. I never equated a boutique hotel as 1,000 rooms. But let me finish on the Randy Gerber side. That's the bar side, and the Whiskey Blue, you know you've arrived. This was a while back when Lennox Lewis fought Evander Holyfield at Madison Square Garden. You know you've arrived when Jack Nicholson is drinking in your bar after the fight. So we did pretty good. But also the restaurant that we're in joint venture partner with is the Marriott Group, which is Michael Bonadi's. He's like Wolfgang Puck of the East Coast. He has Tribeca Grill, Nobu Restaurants, two of the finest restaurants in New York City, and we are partnered with him as well. And the restaurant at the W on the 49th and Lexington is also a Gruner Porrent and Marriott Group restaurant. So that's what we think will separate us. Thank you. One more thing. Okay.
For all of you who think you aren't going to get into the food and beverage side of the business, this is a perfect example of a full-service hotel, and you need to know both lodging and food and beverage. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have one other thing we'd like to present, and this will take 1 minute. We have a plaque that we'd like to present to Mr. Robert Cowan, and if you would allow me just to read this. Conrad N. Hilton College of Hotel and Restaurant Management, the University of Houston, in honor of Robert Cowan, we hereby award this certificate of appreciation for participating at the Eric Hilton Distinguished Chair Lecture Series, March 29th, 2001, signed by yours truly and, more importantly, Dean Allen Stutz. Thank you all very much for being here. We appreciate it.